They didn't just walk away. They walked away when he needed them the most. When his world was collapsing, when his hands were trembling, when his heart was screaming for help. That's when they turned their backs. And maybe that's what broke him. But that's also what built the man you're about to hear about. Because this story isn't about revenge. It's about rebirth. It's about what happens when you have no one left, and you realize that maybe that's the best thing that could have ever happened to you. So before we begin, hit subscribe, bro. Because this channel isn't just about motivation, it's about transformation. Every story here will remind you of who you can become when you stop chasing those who never cared if you stayed. It started quietly. One by one, they disappeared. The people who once said, "I've got your back," became ghosts the moment he fell. They loved him when he was laughing, when he was winning, when life was easy. But when everything fell apart, when the lights went out, not a single hand reached out to pull him up. He didn't understand it at first. He blamed himself. He replayed every conversation, every memory, every moment where he gave too much and received too little in return. He thought, maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I was the problem. But the truth? He was just too genuine for a world that celebrates convenience over loyalty. People don't want real anymore. They want easy. And when he stopped being easy, they stopped being around. The nights were the hardest. You know those nights when your chest feels heavy, not from pain, but from emptiness. He had those for months. He'd stare at the ceiling, thinking about how fast people can forget you, how love can turn into silence, and how promises mean nothing when they're not backed by presence. He wasn't angry. Not at first. He was disappointed. He thought loyalty meant something. He thought love had depth. But life was showing him something brutal. Most people don't leave because they stop caring. They leave because they were never really there to begin with. And that realization, that's what broke him. The kind of breaking you don't cry about. The kind that numbs you. He stopped calling. Stopped explaining. Stopped trying to prove his worth to people who only saw his value when he could give them something. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into silence. That silence felt like death at first, but soon, it became his peace. He started noticing something: the fewer people around him, the more honest his thoughts became. The less he tried to please others, the more he saw who he really was beneath all that pain. One night, sitting alone with nothing but his thoughts, he said to himself, "They left, but I'm still here." It was a small sentence. But that was the start of everything. That's when he realized they didn't break him. They revealed him. All that love he wasted on people who couldn't see his worth, he could give that to himself now. All that energy he used to prove his loyalty, he could use that to rebuild his life. He didn't know it yet, but his solitude was about to become his strength. Because every person who walks away teaches you something, not about them, but about you. They teach you how to stop giving your heart to those who never earned your trust. They teach you how to stand when no one claps for you. They teach you that sometimes losing people is the only way to find yourself. And that's exactly what he did. He was done explaining himself. Done apologizing for outgrowing people who stayed comfortable while he was drowning. Done chasing validation from those who never valued his effort. He was broken, yes, but in that brokenness, something inside him began to awaken. Something that didn't need anyone's approval anymore. Something that whispered, "You're still breathing." And that means the story isn't over. Because the truth is, they didn't destroy him. They simply walked out before his rebirth. And one day, they'll see what they left behind. But by then he won't need them anymore. They say silence is peaceful. But for him, silence was suffocating. It wasn't the kind of silence you choose. It was the kind that finds you when everyone you trusted disappears. When the phone stops ringing. When no one checks in. When the people you would have died for don't even remember your name. He didn't just lose people. He lost the noise. And that's when he realized. He had been surrounded by noise his entire life. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had expectations. And he spent years trying to live up to all of them. But now, in the emptiness, he could finally hear something he hadn't heard in years. His own voice. At first it was faint, weak, like an echo in a canyon. But as the days passed, it grew stronger. The silence wasn't punishment, it was purification. It was life stripping him down to his core so he could finally meet himself again. He stopped waking up for others. Stopped trying to impress anyone. He started sitting alone with his coffee. No music, no distractions. Just breathing. He'd look out the window and see the sunrise not as a new day, but as a new chance. That isolation, it hurt like hell. But pain has a way of teaching you things comfort never will. He learned that solitude doesn't destroy you, it rebuilds you. It takes every broken piece and melts it down, reforging it into something sharper, something stronger. He started journaling, started running, started lifting not for muscles, but for control, for the feeling that he could push through something again. The silence became his gym, his temple, his battlefield. He didn't need applause. He didn't need company. He needed the mirror. Because the man in that mirror, the one who survived abandonment, was becoming his only competition. He learned that loneliness is not the absence of people, it's the absence of connection. And the first person you must reconnect with is yourself. So, he cut the noise even further, deleted contacts that were only convenient, stopped watching people who pretended to care online, but never showed up in real life. He realized how little he needed to feel complete. There was a beauty in it, a dark, quiet kind of beauty. He could hear the rain again. He could feel the wind again. He could think without interference. And in that stillness, he met the version of himself that no one believed in. This was the part no one saw, the rebuild in the shadows, the long nights where he'd whisper to himself, "One day, they'll see. One day, they'll understand what they walked away from." But not out of revenge, out of realization, because he finally saw what they never did, his own worth, his own depth, his own quiet power. He didn't need them to validate his value anymore. He just needed time to turn that pain into progress, time to stop being broken and start being reborn. The isolation that once felt like a curse became the greatest blessing of his life. Because solitude isn't emptiness, it's alignment. It's the moment your soul stops screaming for attention and starts whispering truth. And when you finally hear that whisper, you understand that walking alone was never the end, it was the beginning. The world had gone silent, but inside that silence, something was growing, something calm, something dangerous, something unstoppable. He was no longer the man they left behind. He was the man they'd never recognize again. It didn't happen overnight. There wasn't a single morning where he woke up healed or whole. It came slowly, like embers turning into fire. Pain, discipline, and silence, all mixing together until he wasn't recognizable anymore. The man who once begged for validation stopped asking. The man who once waited for love stopped waiting. And the man who once needed saving finally became his own hero. There was no applause, no crowd cheering him on. Just the sound of his own footsteps at 5 a.m. running through the cold. Breath visible in the freezing air. Mind focused on one thought. Never again. Never again would he beg for attention. Never again would he let weakness wear the mask of kindness. Never again would he give pieces of himself to people who didn't know how to hold them. He started training, but this time it wasn't for the world to see. It was for himself. He built his body in silence, his mind in discipline, and his soul in solitude. No shortcuts, no comfort, no validation. Every rep, every cold shower, every early morning became a statement, "I am not who I was." He understood something powerful. You don't need to announce your comeback. You just need to build it so silently that one day, your presence alone will make the world feel your absence. The world that once broke him had unknowingly created its own punishment. Because now, it would have to watch him rise without being a part of it. He started to glow differently. Not the kind of glow that comes from attention, but the kind that comes from peace. The kind of strength that doesn't shout, it radiates. Every scar became a medal. Every failure became a lesson. And every lonely night became a training ground. He realized that the war was never with them. It was with the weaker version of himself. The version that settled for less. The version that needed approval. The version that feared being alone. Now, when he looked in the mirror, he saw someone else. Someone sharper. Someone calmer. Someone dangerous. because he had nothing left to lose and everything to become. The pain that once haunted him had become fuel. The silence that once crushed him had become peace. The loneliness that once broke him had become clarity. And that's when it hit him. He didn't need revenge. He didn't need closure. He just needed to become so disciplined, so evolved, that even the memory of who he used to be couldn't recognize him. He became his own standard, his own motivation, his own hero. Every day was war, but not with the world. It was war with laziness, with excuses, with the version of himself that wanted to quit. And every day, he chose to fight, not loudly, not publicly, but consistently. Because real transformation doesn't need witnesses. It just needs willpower. And one morning, he looked in the mirror and realized something had changed. The fire in his eyes wasn't pain anymore. It was purpose. He had finally won the battle within. And that's what made him unstoppable. Because when you win the war inside you, there's nothing outside that can ever defeat you again. Now, he wasn't chasing validation. He was chasing evolution. He wasn't looking to prove anyone wrong anymore. He was proving himself right. He had become the storm, the silence before it, and the calm that follows after. They didn't expect to see him again. Not like this. Not with that look in his eyes, calm, cold, and unreachable. When he walked back into their world, it wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was silent, the kind of silence that demands attention. He didn't announce his return. He didn't post a comeback quote. He just started showing up, sharper, stronger, and far beyond what anyone remembered. The same people who once dismissed him now couldn't stop staring. They whispered, "Is that really him? He changed. He looks different." No one dared to say it out loud, but they all felt it. They had lost something they could never replace. He no longer carried the same energy. The boy who once sought approval was gone. The man who stood there now, he didn't chase, he didn't beg, he didn't need. He had become complete on his own. You could see it in his posture, relaxed but powerful. You could hear it in his voice, calm but commanding. And you could feel it in his presence, the energy of someone who knows exactly who he is and doesn't owe explanations anymore. They tried to come back. The same people who walked away when he was broken now wanted to be close again. The same ones who laughed at his silence now wanted to understand it, but it was too late. He didn't hate them, he just outgrew them. He smiled, not out of arrogance, but closure, because now he knew that his value never decreased when they left. It only became visible when they couldn't come back. This was his rise, not fueled by revenge, but by rebirth. He didn't return to make them regret losing him. He returned because he finally remembered who he was before they made him forget. He had rebuilt himself from ashes, and in that process, he learned that nothing burns brighter than a man who has walked through his own fire and survived. When he passed by, people didn't see pain anymore. They saw power. Not loud, chaotic power, but the kind that's earned through endurance. The kind that doesn't need to prove, only to exist. And that's the moment the whispers began. Not out of gossip, but respect. Not out of curiosity, but fear. Because now, they realized something haunting. They didn't destroy him. They created him. They gave him every reason to stop, and he used every reason to rise. They gave him every wound, and he turned every wound into wisdom. They gave him distance, and he turned it into discipline. He became the man they never thought he could be, and the one they'll never be able to forget. Every room he entered felt different now. Every word he spoke carried weight. Every silence he held had power. He was no longer fighting for attention. The world was fighting for his. And as he walked away once more, calm and untouchable, he didn't need to say a word. His silence said it all. You lost access to me when I found myself. He had risen, not to prove them wrong, but to prove to himself that he was never broken, just unfinished. Now he was complete, unreachable, unreplaceable. And as the whispers followed him down the street, they weren't asking where he went. They were asking themselves how they ever let him go. Listen, there comes a moment in every person's life when walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. When silence isn't surrender, it's strength. And when choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. You can't keep breaking yourself to keep others comfortable. You can't keep giving energy to people who drain you just because you're afraid of being alone. At some point, you have to stop chasing acceptance and start building peace. The world will test you. It'll try to convince you that your worth is tied to their approval. But the truth is, the moment you walk away from what disrespects your soul, you begin your rebirth. Don't chase people. Don't explain yourself. And don't ever beg to be understood. The ones meant for you will recognize you when you're whole, not when you're broken. There's beauty in the rebuilding phase that no one sees. The late nights, the quiet work, the moments of doubt. They shape the man or woman you're becoming. While they talk, you evolve. While they laugh, you grow. While they sleep, you grind. And one day, you'll wake up, and the pain that once made you cry will be the fire that makes you unstoppable. So if you're in that phase right now, the lonely one, the silent one, the rebuilding one, don't run from it. Embrace it. Because it's not the end of your story. It's the part where the real story begins. Walk away from what drains you. Walk toward what builds you. And don't ever look back, not even for a second. Because the version of you that's coming will make them regret ever letting you go. Stay quiet. Stay disciplined. Stay focused. And when the world finally realizes who you've become, you won't need to say a word. Your silence will say it all.